Welcome to the Truth Expedition. I'm your host, Mark Bischofsky, and on this show, this is the show where we dig for truth, the hard truth, which is becoming hard to find in this world. And so if you haven't noticed, I haven't had a show in, I think it's going on almost a month now. I had the pleasure of taking a vacation. I was gone for almost 3 weeks. I'd missed vacationing the last couple of years running for office and all the activism, so I tried to kind of make up for that. Went into the wilderness, had a fantastic time camping, paddleboarding, fishing, mountain biking, making s'mores, making memories with my amazing family and some friends too. And so I'll tell you, I've always been one who's kind of shy, not wanting to be part of society. So doing this kind of stuff, running for office is foreign to me. Being in the woods, in the wilderness, where there's very few people and it's nature. I mean, how it's so refreshing and revitalizing. And then it's always been hard for me in the past to come back from a longer vacation, to come into society, so to speak. This time was difficult. The world is a damn circus. Everything that's happening, it's so polarized. And, these jabs and this scamdemic and this transgender push and everything that's happening in this world right now is so crazy. So coming back was difficult, but I'm here. I'm back doing the show. And I should also mention with that too, so there hasn't been a show for a month. I was extremely blessed. The first few shows, Dr. Kaufman, Brooke Jackson, Joel Salatin, all these amazing, nationally known people agreeing to come on the show. And I think I'm going to kind of shift a little bit more now to kind of a local perspective, because I think you don't have to be famous to have an important message. And so, the show will probably be every other week, once a month, maybe weekly again, depending on how the guests roll in. Things have gotten really busy in my personal life, so it does take time to prepare for these shows. So that's just kind of where we're going with the Truth Expedition. And I thank you so much for tuning in, watching the show, being a part of this movement. And without you good folks watching, I wouldn't be doing it. And so I'm going to continue. I enjoy doing it. I enjoy doing the show and meeting the guests that I've been able to have. My guest today is more local, and I'll introduce her in just a moment. I do want to talk about something, though, when it comes to this scamdemic and these vaccines, and I can say that. I can say vax genocide because we're not on YouTube. In my daily life, if you look at my Facebook page, you're going to see, hundreds, if not thousands at this point, of people who have succumbed to the vaccine. We never know in every single instance if it was from the jab, but, investigating the excess death. You may have seen recently in one of my last maybe 5-6 posts, the disability claims in the UK are through the roof. I mean, this is happening. And so far it's kind of been, I didn't know anyone personally who had died, who was young and was part of this excess death. And I will mention too, so some of these I should say too, I don't post all the deaths I see because I get personally attacked for a lot of them because I don't know exactly. And you should know I don't do it to sensationalize whatsoever. I am very sympathetic, emotional person who doesn't want to be doing this, but I feel like since the mainstream isn't talking about it. But anyway, there was a death in the Twin Cities area of a nurse. I didn't post this one, but I believe about 30 years old, has 2 young kids at home. So this is, it's hitting close to the medical field, and then more recently, someone close to our family, and I'm not going to get into details, but someone very close to us passed away, very young, very healthy, and it's insane. It's escalating. I heard April was one of the, the excess death in April was through the roof. This isn't slowing down, and it scares the hell out of me. And I'm going to continue to be unafraid to talk about this stuff. I do get slammed. I get haters. They say I'm doing this to sensationalize or for political gain. I'll tell you this, by talking about this stuff, I have no political future because they're just going to make mincemeat out of me, calling me a conspiracy theorist. So this is not for political gain. There's no way I can run for office again after talking about these things. And there's for money, no. I've given up, close to a couple $100,000 in salary now. I do get a few donations, but it all goes into the website and putting on events. So yeah, that's kind of that. But the death is getting too close to home here, and I'm not going to stop posting about it and investigating it. And that brings me to talking about finances and events. We have an event coming up that I'm hosting with Mask Off Minnesota and the Vaccine Safety Council of Minnesota at the Mermaid in Mounds View on September 10th. Aaron Seary, who's the attorney for ICANN, and Del Bigtree, if you watch The High Wire, so he's their lead attorney, Aaron Seary and Associates. Aaron's the single most effective attorney in the nation, maybe in the world, who's been suing the federal government and winning. He's the one that made Pfizer, actually, I believe it was the FDA, to turn over Pfizer's documents that they wanted to keep hidden for 75 years. He just won and forced them to turn over Moderna's documents on their vaccine trials. He's removed the vaccine mandates in Washington, D.C. He just won a case to provide for religious exemptions in the state of Mississippi. Aaron Seary is a hero. He's well-spoken, so he's going to give a presentation, action steps we can take. He's going to do a Q&A with the audience afterwards, so please do get your tickets. I believe it's tempotickets.com/Aaron Seary. You can get your tickets there, or just check on my Facebook page, but please get tickets for that. I'd like to meet everyone who watches the show, follows me on Facebook, and there's so many good people that I want to meet, and that would be one place we can do that. And the last thing before we get to the guests here, I'm going to talk about my promoting of these apricot seeds. A lot of people have been buying these. I'm asked to promote a lot of different products, and I'm not going to promote anything that I don't take and believe in 100%. But you know what? Do not buy them until you read this book, World Without Cancer. You can see all my bookmarks in here, all the pertinent information I want to continue reading, so that I realize how effective these apricot seeds, or Laetrile, or amygdalin is the molecular name for the chemical, vitamin B17. So basically the research that was done in the 60s and 70s shows that these apricot seeds can control cancer, maybe prevent cancer. They're good for all other aspects of health as well. So I take about 20 of these seeds a day. You want to start with about 3 per hour. But do read the book first. Now, you can get these seeds and the book at rncstore.com, rncstore.com. You can watch the interview I did with Dr. Richardson's son, John Richardson Jr., talking about these seeds and his company. If you use the code TruthExpedition, one word, TruthExpedition, at checkout, you'll get 10% off. And so go get yourself some Laetrile, amygdalin, apricot seeds. And now, without further ado, I'll introduce today's guest. Like I said, we're going to go with a more local perspective for a while here. I'm a parent. I have 3 little boys, 8-year-old twin boys, and 11-year-old. I love them dearly. And being a parent is a challenge, to say the least. And so today I have parent coach, professional parent coach, former teacher, Pam Thompson, on the program to help myself be a better parent, give some tips, talk about her business, how you can contact her to be coached on how you can become a better parent. So thanks for being here, Pam.
Thanks for having me.
So let's just talk a little bit about your history, your past, why you became a parent coach, which is kind of a unique niche. Mm-hmm. So I understand you used to be a teacher?
Yep. Well, and my story actually starts before I became a teacher. I have a degree in family and child development. I love children. I love families. I love the idea of families. God has put us in families. It's an important job that we have as parents. And so I've worked with kids and families for over 30 years.
Awesome.
So,
and then became a teacher with early childhood development, correct?
Yes, I became a teacher in a school district. And I've had a couple different jobs in early childhood, but my most recent job was as a teacher in an ECFE, Early Childhood Family Education Program. Mm-hmm.
And
yep.
we talked a little bit pre-interview off camera about how that part of your career ended, and kind of similar to my situation, maybe not for refusing to take the jab, but you're no longer in that profession, correct?
Correct. I started looking into parent coaching because I got some help with some situations that I had with a couple of girls that were extremely challenging. They had some developmental trauma. So I got some help and started thinking about it, but I don't typically quit jobs. And so I was teaching, and it just became really hard to be there. The atmosphere changed, the community changed, the expectations, and I was experiencing anxiety that I've never experienced before. And so I started going through a coaching certification program in January of 21 and ended up resigning last summer. So last year was my first year not teaching for a while.
What was the district you were in? Were they mandating vaccines?
They did not. Actually, the district that I am in, when all the employers were supposed to start mandating and the school districts were going to, but they had to vote it through, our advisory committee, or I can't think what it's called at the moment, but they actually did not pass it. So I think it was maybe the only school district in Minnesota that did not pass that.
Well, that's lucky.
So
it wasn't the vaccine mandate that
No.
Made you make that, I'm sure, hard decision to quit that career. Masks?
Yep. I had done, when the whole stuff started, I had started doing research and on my own and found that masks didn't work, and then started looking at it as how does it affect young children, because that's what I care about, and how awful it is for social and emotional health and for learning issues and speech and language, and thought it was an awful thing to do to children, for both the kids and the adults in their lives to have things covering their faces. I was fortunate the children in my class did not have to wear anything over their faces. So there were a few that did, but all the adults were supposed to wear or were required to wear something over their faces.
Yeah, those masks. So if anyone's interested to look, the Cochrane Review. Cochrane Review is they look at metadata for the medical industry, and they just, it was a few months ago, you may already know this, but they looked at basically every study done on masks and showed there was no effect at stopping viruses. And that's something I knew as well very early on. It was one of those things that kind of got me to dig deeper, but there were studies pre-pandemic showing that masks don't stop viral infections. In fact, they can increase your risk of getting bacterial infections. It's like a petri dish on your face, basically, and especially with kids. And I actually spoke at a couple school board meetings where my kids were going. I homeschool now, but that day they were deciding whether they're going to continue to force these masks on these kids, and I ended up pulling my kids out the next day because they, even with presenting them with facts, I offered to show them a fit test. I'm a professional fit tester for these masks, to show them the numbers on the machine that we use, OSHA certified equipment, showing that they don't stop these viruses and the damage that they can do. And yeah, that's another thing. So it's not just, kids don't wear them right. They're below the nose. They're touching them all day. They're telling these kids to take them off at lunch while they're right next to each other. I mean, it's like a circus. It's theater. But beyond just that risk of potential infection with bacteria and the colonization of the bacteria that can happen on that mask, I believe the bigger damage is due to, like you had mentioned, Pam, with the psychological effect of having people walking around with their faces covered.
Right.
And
yep, kids learn from our faces. They learn about emotions. They learn how to read emotions, how to deal with people, how to communicate, and it's really important to see faces. Yeah.
Yeah, because the facial expressions, and I don't know. I used to know the percentage of communication isn't verbal. Is actually a small part of it. It's body language and facial expressions, and the kids living in this world, going to these. I remember going to the store and had to put the damn mask on, and I admit I should have never done it. I should have just walked into these places, but occasionally we did put them on because I didn't want the fight, I guess. But just the dystopian nature of it all. Arrows leading you in the grocery store or Walmart or whatever, saying one way down this aisle, and everyone wearing a mask and everyone freaked out, keeping their distance from one another. Even though my kids were, told the truth, it still, I think, affected them. They're living in this world, and they're witnessing the circus, which it has become. So, you're a parent coach. And so before we go any further, where can people contact you if they want to get some help becoming a better parent?
Yeah, so I can give you a link.
Yeah, and I'll put all this will be in the show notes.
And so right now I'm on Facebook and I'm working on a website, but it hasn't been completed yet. So I do have a link with more information and a phone number that people can contact me at.
Okay, so what kind of format is the parent coaching? I think I read you do small groups, bigger groups, and probably some speaking, and then one-on-one as well? Yep.
Typically what I spend most of my time on is working with individual parents. So usually husband and wife, mom and dad. Sometimes it's just a mom. I haven't had anybody it's just been a dad yet, but one set of parents. I can do group coaching if people want to, like 3 couples, if they wanted to pay less. And I do speaking too, so I can speak to a small group or a large group on discipline that connects with your child's heart. And I have a couple of courses that I can do as well where people can take a class.
Yeah, so just kind of more general information, kind of general overview, something I should probably look at. Again, I have 8-year-old 3 boys, 8-year-old twins, and there's just like this competitive nature kind of between them. So a lot of fighting, I should say. I mean, they love each other. They're best friends. And then my 11-year-old, so pretty close in age, and they're amazing. I get complimented all the time about how, in public, how, well behaved they are. But I'll tell you, I'm sure it's the same with all kids. They a little too comfortable with mom and dad and take advantage of us from time to time. But I'll seek a little advice here, Pam. So one of my children, I'm not going to name names, but we believe was actually vaccine injured from the MMR years ago. Perfectly, behavior was perfectly normal before the shot. Afterwards, got really sick, fever, crying a lot. Behavior changed, became very fussy, and it's kind of continued to a certain degree. Still, just thank God, not autism or anything like that, but some changes. But he gets caught up in these, having a fit, and it just kind of escalates. And so what is we've tried everything, taking things away. I don't believe in corporal punishment. But, there's times where it's like, do I spank him? Like, what do I do here? It's pulling my hair out here where it just kind of escalates, taking things away from him, like maybe his Kindle or saying he can't have a play date or something just doesn't seem to work. It seems like there's no consequence that's going to be enough for him to control his fit.
Sure. Well, let me step back, and when I do coaching, I typically coach in 4 sessions, and I go over 4 messages that kids need to hear from their parents. And so I'm going to go through these quickly and kind of talk through them, and then we can go a little bit deeper into your situation, your specific situation. So the first message is, child, you're safe with me. And that's all about the parent. So it's all about what are my thoughts and beliefs about this? How am I affected by both my past and what's going on in the present situation? And how can I make sure that I am calm when I'm dealing with my child with whatever they're going through? So it might be taking some deep breaths. It might be saying a quick prayer. God, I know this is going to be tough. Please give me wisdom. Help me to deal with this child that I love. Help me to see them the way that you see them. And part of the reason for that is that we learn only when we feel safe. And as adults, we're bigger, we're louder, we're stronger than our kids, and so we can come across a little bit scary, even when we don't want to be. So how can we calm ourselves down? The second thing about that is that we often, as parents, as people, as humans, we get our value from different things. And one of the things as parents that we get our value from is our kids. how they act or what they do, or it means a lot to us. We love our kids, and when we get our value from our kids, it puts a big pressure on our kids. So making sure that our value preferably is coming from who God says that we are, and not from our children. So that's the first message. The second one is, child, you're loved no matter what. And most of us as parents feel this for our kids, but our kids don't necessarily understand that or don't comprehend it from us. And so how do we connect with our kids? How do we make sure that they feel loved from us? Also, what's going on in them? So what's going on in your son when he's getting wound up? And so thinking about it from his perspective. Is it happening at a specific time? Could he be hungry or tired or bored or needs to move? So those are some of the things. Or is he getting some kind of attention from the behavior or some other reward from it? So looking at those kinds of things, and then dealing with that. Another thing that we can keep in mind is that when we misbehave, we know we don't deserve love. When we act right, we go, oh yeah, I deserve whatever good things I'm getting. When we don't feel like we deserve it. And so that's when our kids know that they're loved no matter what is in their misbehavior.
Yeah.
And so it's a good thing for that reason. The third message is that you're called and capable, that God's given us the skills that we need to do the work He's called us to do. Not meaning that we don't have things to learn, because we all do, and our kids obviously have a lot to learn. But what can we affirm in them? And then what skills can we build in them? And then also thinking that there is in misbehavior, in poor choices, in things that we do wrong, there's skills in that. So for example, in lying, to be a good liar, you need to be able to have a good memory. You need to be creative. Mm-hmm. You probably care about what people think. So how do we affirm those while at the same time helping them learn how to use those appropriately? And I love to look at learning and teaching in this way. Kids have a lot to learn, and so when they need to learn how to do math, when they don't know how to do math, we teach them math. When they don't know how to read, we teach them to read. When they don't know how to ride a bike, we teach them to ride a bike. When they don't know how to swim, we teach them to swim. When they don't know how to behave, we
teach them to behave, but it's like...
Yeah, but most people don't, right? It's like,
Yeah.
how can we punish them and make them do what we want them to do?
Yeah.
Is typical what we do. And yet, we can't expect them to behave right if they don't know how or if they can't. So then it's about teaching. So sometimes misbehavior is actually not about giving consequences or punishments, it's about teaching.
Yeah.
But the fourth message, does that make sense?
It does. It's just, putting that into practice, because, I know that in public, he wouldn't escalate it, so he knows it's not right what he's doing. And I think for him, it's attention to a certain degree. He wants to be heard. There's different triggers he has, but, he's smart,
Mm-hmm.
actually reads a little better, than the other twin. So it's like, for instance, he'll try to, maybe dad, he'll try to ask a question. If I don't respond immediately, he just like gets into this so
Mm-hmm.
angry.
Mm-hmm.
And I try to be calm, for the most part, very calm, like, hey, you just have to be patient. Patience, you got to learn, maybe say a prayer, all these things. But that's not good enough.
Yeah, he wants your attention right now.
And even when you offer your attention, it just like he gets stuck on the initial moment, and it's really hard to unwind him from that. And
Mm-hmm.
it's like you try to calm him, always saying, I love you, but you can't act this way. You need to control your emotions a little better. And I know, as an 8-year-old, control your emotions, what does that mean to him? But and then it gets to a point where it just kind of almost escalates, maybe for more attention, and maybe like you said, then it proves to him he's loved, but it's definitely no lack of love. So, and then it ends up usually with a mild punishment, like
Sure.
we'll maybe threaten, if you keep acting this way, then so and so's not going to come over later in the day, your friend, or a lot of times you're going to have to go to your room till you calm down. I mean, are these things that I should be doing?
So there's a couple of things that can be used in here for teaching. One is empathy can work really well. So empathy is not meaning that what he's doing is okay, that you agree with what he's doing, but empathy is understanding. So it might be saying something like, oh, you really wanted my attention and you weren't able to get it. That's really tough, isn't it? Or that's really frustrating. So getting him to hear that you understand what he's going through. And sometimes that can calm kids down, and especially if we can get 3 yeses. So if you can ask 3 questions to get him to see that you understand what he's going through, that can help calm the situation.
Yeah.
The other thing is sometimes asking questions, and I kind of did that with that, but even I wonder statements. I wonder what you could do next time to get Dad's attention.
Yeah, my wife's really good at the I wonder what. Yeah, so we do kind of implement these things. But yeah, your first suggestion there is maybe something we could do a little bit better. Yeah, but it seems like even when we do these things, sometimes it continues to escalate. He's unsatisfied. It's almost we feel like he just wants to, to a certain degree. Maybe it just like feels good to blow up for him.
Sure. Well, and the other thing, as I mentioned before, when we're not feeling safe, we can't think. But also when kids are dysregulated, they can't think. And so trying to teach him at that moment, he's not going to learn anything. The goal when kids are wound up like that is to help them regulate. So to use our bodies and our regulation to help them calm down, and then at another time to discuss it. Oh, earlier this happened and then this happened. I wonder what you were feeling. I wonder what could happen next time. So using those techniques in a later time can be more helpful because he's not going to get it at the time.
Right. And so do you feel like the threats of you're not going to have this play date if you don't stop, it's after, because we always start with, hey, you need to calm down, understand you're disappointed and but then if it continues to escalate, then we escalate to, threats of you're not going to do this, you're not going to get your Kindle for a week or whatever. I mean, are those things we should try to avoid?
Well, I'll go into the 4th message in just a second, but I also want to mention that our kids aren't robots. And so as parents, we want things to stop now. We know that it's good for your son to not do this. And one of the issues that we have is we project in the future. If my son's doing this now, how's he ever going to have a job? How's he going to be able to be married?
Yeah.
How's he going to keep friends? And so then we get more afraid, and then we become more controlling. And as we become more controlling, they usually fight back even more. Mm-hmm. And so that happens. But it doesn't mean that we don't give consequences. And so the 4th message, so the first message, you're safe with me, you're loved no matter what, you're called and capable. When we're able to use those, we can do less correcting, but we're all human and we all make mistakes. And so we do need correction. So the 4th message is you're responsible for your life and your actions. And in that, we're looking more for how do we teach them responsibility and wisdom, rather than how do we control them using fear or punishment, but how do we teach them? Because if we just control them, we're looking at, do we need to follow them around for the rest of their lives? That's not our goal. Our goal is for them to be able to do these things on their own. And so we teach them first, you're called and capable, but then when they do mess up, they do need some help in making things right. And so we look at what is a make it right consequence. And so, for example, something happens like that, we typically make them apologize or send them to their room or take something away. what do kids learn? What do they learn from that type of thing?
Yeah, it's a good question. I don't know. I mean, because I'll tell you, like, sometimes there is no consequence that will get him to stop. I could threaten, you're going to be in your room for the next year. I mean, not that I've ever done that, but it's like, I could say you're not going to go on this, to this birthday party or whatever, something he's just dying to do. In the moment, it does not matter.
Right.
And so I've found that there's really no threat of punishment in the moment that is going to have the outcome I want, which is to immediately cease the behavior.
Right. Right. Which I think goes back to kids can't think. They can't think clearly. And that's for a reason. God made us that way. A silly example, but if there's a bear chasing me, I don't need to know where the bear lives or what the bear likes to do in its spare time. I just need to either run, or I need to stop and freeze, or I need to fight. So the fight, flight, or freeze. So when your son is in that situation, he's not able to think, he's not able to access that part of his brain. He's just fighting or running or freezing. And so any kind of punishment or consequence you give him probably isn't going to teach him anything in that moment. But those kind of consequences, typically when I look at those, I think, okay, well, I might learn to lie. If somebody tells me to say I'm sorry, I can say I'm sorry, but I'm not going to mean it, so I just learn to lie. Or I can learn to hide what I'm doing, or I can be really resentful and mad at my parents. There's not a whole lot of learning of how to, in that situation, how to control myself. So that then comes back to the teaching, teaching out of that moment. How do you help him learn how to calm down and get what he needs? There's a reason he's doing it. Why is he doing it, and how can he get what he wants or needs in appropriate ways? And then looking at three different steps with consequences. And the first is there a natural impact that's big enough to learn from? So for example, if a young child touches a stove, they're going to burn their hand, a hot stove. And we don't need to give them a consequence. They've learned that I don't want to touch that hot stove. So it might be, oh, that really hurt. Let's go take care of that. Let's make it feel better. And then later saying, what can you do next time so you know not to touch a stove when it's hot? So you're teaching. Most of the things that kids do, there's not a big enough natural impact for them to learn not to do it or to do something different. So the next step is what kind of consequence how can they make it right? So if he is being rude and disrespectful and yelling or whatever to get your attention, what can he do later to make it right, to restore the relationship with you? And thinking of that God's put us in relationships with other people, and when we do something like that, it breaks that relationship. So how do we restore it? How do we make it right? So can you think of anything that he could do to help restore that relationship with you?
Nothing specific. I mean, it's always, ends up being resolved, and, he's actually the sweetest little boy. Just, he's always, put him to bed, give him the hug, say the prayer. He comes back, and he's always got to come in our bedroom and give us that one last hug at night. And so we always end up resolving it with love, telling him how much we love him. But, nothing specific, I guess, other than just letting him know he's truly loved.
So one thing that sometimes parents will do when kids are saying something unkind or being unkind is, okay, you've said something unkind with your words. Now you can say something kind with your words. So resolving it by saying something kind. And in that situation, it sounds like he probably, if he was allowed to deal with it on his own, may come back to you and be really apologetic, feel really bad about what he's done after the fact.
I think he internalizes that. We know he feels bad, but the apologies, we kind of force the apology, like you need to go apologize to mom for that. And in the moment, it just feels forced, like, it's not
like he's
sincere.
Just saying the words.
Right.
Yeah, and so it might be waiting for a little bit and commenting on it. Looks like you really feel bad about what happened. Do you want to go, and is there something you want to say to mom? and helping him apologize because a real apology is a good restoration, is a good restoration tool. Another thing that we talk about is do-overs. So, and as adults, when we want to parent and we make a mistake and we think, oh, I'm never going to do that again. I'm going to do this instead. And brain science says if we do that, we're more likely to do what we didn't want to do because we just focused on it. Mm-hmm. But brain science also says that if we do it over the way that we want to do it, we're more likely to do what we wanted to do because we've done it. And so with kids, it might be saying, okay, son, here's what happened. Let's try it again. Why don't you do it over? Do it again. And how could you do that same thing? How could you get dad's attention? And so him practicing an appropriate way gives him practice, so he's more likely to do it an appropriate way later, but also feels good, starts that restoration process because he's actually doing something about it. So that's another option in both teaching and giving a consequence in that.
Yeah. I will say this last time we had an episode, we gave the consequence, because a lot of times, we're guilty of not following through, which is probably not a good thing, because I want them to enjoy life and have fun, and I feel, to be honest, it just feels horrible to extract him from, if the other two are going to be going to have fun, I just can't live with myself to see him suffer in that way. So following through is so difficult. Right. But we did this last time. You're not going to your friends. So we let the other twin go. And I will say it probably following through did have some effect, because since that episode, he's just it hasn't escalated the same. We're able to remind him, like, remember, we mean what we say.
Sure. Yeah.
And so.
Yep, we do have to follow through as parents, absolutely, because kids learn really quick that they can do what they want, and then nobody's going to do anything even if they say it. A different way that you could handle that is, have you made it right? You can go to your friends as soon as you've made it right. Mm-hmm. So not using it as a punishment of you don't get to, but you can go as soon as you take care of this.
And I think we try that, but again, it's like the making it right is insincere in the moment, like the sorry, the apology. So that doesn't seem to, it takes a little time.
It takes a little time.
But follow through, is important. But again, it's so difficult it breaks my heart to not let him go and do that thing. Yeah.
But at that point, depending on how much time is in between what's happened and when he's going to do the thing, there is that time for him to choose when he's ready to make it right and then be able to do the thing that he wanted to do. Mm-hmm. And that's his choice of how to do it. So, if, for example, if the two boys are arguing and you hear one say something really unkind to the other, and then they want to go spend time with a friend, and you can make sure, follow the framework, make sure that you're in a good place and you're calm, and then connect first. So after the situation, connect with them. Oh, I love when you go and have fun with your friends. I'm so glad you get to do that. So there's a connection there. And then the teaching and the responsible. So the last two messages could be, have you made it right with your brother? Did you fix it? If you didn't, oh, well, I really want you to go to the park with your friend. As soon as you fix it with your brother, you get to go. So it's not a punishment. It's not I'm inflicting something on you. This is a consequence of life. You get the opportunity to make it right. And once it's made right and you have that relationship with your brother or your mom or your dad again, you get to go and enjoy with your friends. Mm-hmm. And so then they've learned a skill about how to make things right, how to fix things, how to restore relationships, and it's helpful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I also believe that faith, to a certain degree, has helped too, bringing God into it, and you need to pray. Yeah. And God doesn't like this behavior, So those kinds of things seem to help. And this little boy we're talking about, I'm not going to say names because maybe there'll come a day he watches this, he knows who I'm talking about. But he's probably the most inquisitive about Jesus, and the one that wants to pray the most, and things like that. So I feel like faith and bringing that up, at the right time can help as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And how do we make things right with, God makes things right with us, but how do we respond? And when we do something that hurts the relationship with God, how do we make it right with God? And so this learning how to make things right with each other also helps our relationship with God. Yeah. Yeah,
there's so many instances I could bring up
Absolutely.
about how did I respond appropriately. In fact, a few days ago we're at my older son's baseball game, and I found that they thought it was a good idea to be spitting on each other. Now, 8-year-old boys, I'm sure that's and my response was like, this is ridiculous. Now that I made them sit on the bleachers, just pleading with them to never ever do it again. But it's with boys, it's crazy.
Right.
The corrections you have to make. And
right.
Spitting. Who thought it would be a good idea to spit on each other?
Right. When did you think, when you were a parent, you were going to have to say, "Stop spitting on each other"? Right. All the things. Yeah. And at that point, when you feel like, oh, I don't like the way I handled that, you can do a do-over. Hey, I don't like the way I talked to you. Can I try it again?
Yeah.
And then you can try it again, which gives them an example of a do-over, of making things right, and also gives you practice so you do it the way you wanted next time.
I always like to plug in there, the reason, and my wife's really good at this too, the reason we're doing this is because we love you so much.
Yeah.
And we want you to have just a wonderful life, and so we need to correct these things. So we're always saying that kind of thing, and that was, I know, something from my perspective that was missing as a child for me. I just got punished.
Mm-hmm.
There was no explanation of, or that I was loved was a part of it. So I intuitively knew that was missing for me as a child. So we always try to, the reason we're doing this is because we love you so much. And I should say too, I'm guilty of not following through sometimes and maybe spoiling them a little too much, because had a heart attack in 2017, lucky to be alive. And so for me, every day is a bonus.
Right.
I feel like any day could be my last day. And so I just have this desire, and I feel like this need to spoil them. It's always in the back of my head. How, if I was to die, how are they gonna, view this this punishment or that? So, that's a hard thing for me.
Right. It is. Most of us have a bent either towards the grace or towards the justice. So most of us either want to make sure our kids don't hurt, or we want to make sure our kids do the right thing. Mm-hmm. And most of us goes one direction or the other, and most of us are married to our opposite as well, which makes things interesting. But boundaries actually help kids, structure helps kids feel safe. Yeah. And so it is a good thing. It's how we do it and how it comes across, and when we can do it in a way that they feel like we're for them, and we're not just punishing them, we're helping them learn. They aren't happy about it. Nobody likes, there's a Bible verse about that. No, I can't think of the word that it's used, but no discipline is pleasant at the time. We don't want to be disciplined. We don't want to have experience consequences to our negative actions, but it is helpful. So it's how we do it, and how we, in my opinion, from learning about this framework, it's how we use that framework. And that framework, the wonderful thing about that is it works with just toddlers. Parents can use it, and I use it with my adult children, my 23 and 28-year-old. I've improved my relationship with them because of using some of these techniques and heart work. And so it's really helpful. But parenting is not, it's not easy. It's not for wimps.
It's not. And, I'm kind of the, after giving up my career as a respiratory therapist, I'm kind of more the homemaker, for lack of better words. My wife's been working a little bit more to make up for that income, and I've been homeschooling. And so it's a challenge,
Yeah.
breakfast, lunch, dinner, math, writing, reading, science, history, everything in between. And so I'm with them, aside from coming and doing these shows, I'm pretty much with them all the time. And being a parent, I always knew being a mom or, the dad that might stay home, I always knew it was hard work and one of the most important jobs a person can do, but it's something else to raise kids. It is the most important thing, and it's hard.
It's hard. It's exhausting. Yep. And homeschooling requires an extra something. You can get away with stuff easier when you're not homeschooling your kids. When you're homeschooling your kids too, there's
right.
an extra.
It's they
in there.
Again, they'll take advantage. It's we're that authority, the teacher, the authority figure, so they can take advantage. If they don't want to do the math, it's sometimes they have a fit, and it's battling through that because I don't want math to take 2 hours because this fit's going to take an hour.
Right.
So it's a challenge.
Yeah.
But
Sometimes choices help too. Do you want to do your math first, or do you want to do science first?
Yep.
Do you want to do schoolwork out on the deck today, or you want to do it at the kitchen table? So sometimes giving them some choices that I'm okay with both the answers to.
Yeah.
Sometimes that's helpful.
Those are good tips. So I guess on the homeschool, a few more questions. We got a little more time. So on the homeschool front, I should ask, how important do you feel like, because obviously there's less peer-to-peer interaction other than amongst the siblings. They're still socialized, I believe, adequately, but how important is that peer-to-peer interaction? I mean, how often is enough, if you've got any suggestions there?
Well, my kids were homeschooled part of the time, and I think kids who are homeschooled have actually more opportunities to socialize with other people than kids in school. Because in school, most of their day is told to be quiet and not participate in activities with other people. When kids are homeschooled, there's more opportunity, with siblings and parents, or grandparents, or aunts and uncles, or people at the grocery store, or going on field trips, or hanging out with friends. They have typically much more time available because school takes less time.
Yeah.
And having our 11-year-olds socialized by other 11-year-olds isn't always what we want.
Yeah, it's that segregation of just all the same age. So I feel like my kids are a little more well-rounded in that regard, as far as they're having to communicate with other adults and other other aged people throughout the day much more often, and so I think that has been a big benefit for us.
I think that's a huge benefit, and that's normal life. I don't only hang out with people my age.
Yeah.
I hang out with littles, and I hang out with people much older than me too. So I think it's a good thing for kids to learn, to be able to be with people of different ages.
Yeah, so it's like that kind of brings me to the conspiratorial side of my perspective of things. Is like this whole public school system, in my mind, is this intentional kind of indoctrination, where, and I'm sure most of the viewers agree, but they're and there's some history to this too. Marx wrote the Communist Manifesto, I believe 1848. It was just months after that where public schools started in this country, and just the way that it's done with perfect lines, and they answer to a bell, all these things. So I feel like the whole system is set up to just kind of create obedient population. Agree with that at all?
I don't necessarily disagree with it. I think there's a lot of teachers who that's not their goal, and yet when you have a class of 20 or 30 kids, you've got to have them cooperating.
Yeah.
But I think that there's some definite challenges and bad things that don't go well in the public schools.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
and I wouldn't say that definitely the teachers wouldn't be guilty. So please know that I don't believe that. I think it's just the system and people.
Yeah.
It's the same with the healthcare system. What's happening right now, are the doctors guilty? To a certain degree, but most of them know, it's the system.
Yeah.
And, it's healthcare was started by the Rockefellers, and they went away from natural health to this chemical health system, and kind of same with the school system. The Rockefellers were a big part of that too. So definitely not the teachers. I think the teachers are doing the best they can, and I would say for most of them, they don't feel like it's indoctrination. They're doing a job and trying to do the best they can.
Right, right.
But the school system is failing. We see test scores dropping, all this transgender stuff going on, and the CRT, all this social emotional stuff that's brought into the schools. Instead of focusing on academics, they're focusing on all this other bizarre stuff, and we see test scores continue to drop.
Right.
I think because of it.
Right. Yep. There's a lot of stuff in schools. Yep. Yep.
And so I would say another thing, just the world in general. I feel like, I grew up in the 70s and 80s, and the amount of freedom I had as a kid. I remember as a kindergartner, I was going down the block to friends. There wasn't a day gone by that I didn't hang out with some friends, and I was free to kind of roam my neighborhood at that age. Going several blocks away, I kind of had my boundaries. You don't go past this busy street, this street, this street. I kind of had my box, but I could explore within that, even at like age 5, I swear. And the range just grew as I got older. But nowadays, it seems like, there was a study that just came out. Loneliness is an epidemic now. I think it's the teenagers, but 1 out of 4 feels lonely and depressed, and it's just the whole world has changed now. I don't know if it's, obviously I have a certain fear my kids are going to get hit by a car or kidnapped or whatever, but I feel like that has just escalated to a point where maybe parents are maybe too much of helicopter parents.
Yep. I think right now typically parents are very helicopter. Yep. We love our kids. We want everything to go well for our kids, and so we try to protect them as much as we can, and it is to their detriment.
And it's a battle. It's how much range do I give them? So the kids are 8 now, and it's just recently we've let them kind of more explore the neighborhood on their own, but it's just the world has changed, and now social media and everything. It's almost like, talked to a friend the other day, it's almost as if we are aliens that have been just dropped into a new world. It's that different now. Right.
Yep. And our kids know a lot more about these things than we do because they were born into it. So, babies know how to swipe on a phone to see the next picture. I was at a birthday party of a 2-year-old, and she was swiping to see the pictures. So they were born into this social media and technology era. We weren't, and so they can get into it much easier than we can. And so that's another reason to teach our kids rather than to try to control what they do, because they have so much access to things that they need to, absolutely we need to put boundaries around them and structure around them. But at some point, they're going to be able to find stuff that we can't control. And so how do we teach them to make wise decisions that keep them safe as well?
Yeah. How much screen time, are you familiar with statistics about like that? I mean, how do you feel about, because I know for a fact if, we have an Xbox, I'm guilty, we limit it, a lot. They don't get it very often. It's like a treat for them. But I do notice that when they're, like we call it brain frying on their, Kindles or on the Xbox, their behavior is not the same. I mean, it's not good for them. And how much is too much? And, any advice there?
Yeah, that's such a good question. I will say that 2 and under should not have any screen time.
Yeah.
It changes their brain, and so they should not have any. After that, limited as much as possible is good, but they live in a culture where it's the way they connect with their friends, and it's the fun that they have. And it does change. It changes the way, it's changed our attention span.
Yeah.
Our attention span is much shorter because of the quick images that we get on technology. So I know that there's research. I haven't done research.
Like memory too. I can't tell you how many phone numbers I used to be able to keep in my head.
Right.
I know my wife's and maybe one friend's phone number now. So Memory training, I'm sure, is at a deficit because of all this technology. And, you know, it's in a perfect world. It's too bad because all of this technology can be used for good.
Yep.
And we know that it's not the way that, you know, all these tech giants are collecting our data and listening to us. You know, they're probably listening right now. It's crazy how I can be talking about some subject and then the next thing I know, I get on my phone and there's an advertisement there for something I was talking about.
Right.
So, you know, the technology is obviously got a lot of upside and potential to be used for good, but I believe it's destroying, that's a strong word, but these generations, you know, again with the loneliness. They feel like they're connected because on social media they are, but there's nothing that can replace one-on-one connection with either your peers or with other people. And it's hard. And again, motivation as well, because when I was a kid, my entertainment was like, if there wasn't a friend to hang around with, I'd grab my baseball bat and glove and ball and I'd go down to the park and I'd pretend like I was the Brewers playing a baseball game. Baseball to me was like, I loved it. I wanted to be as good as possible. But now my kid plays baseball, but he's just not that enthused because there's so many other things that can give him that gratification really quickly with the baseball on the Xbox.
Boredom is a great thing because it makes us do something. And so kids would pretend something, or they'd make something, or they'd build something, or you know, whatever. And now boredom typically leads to a screen.
All right, kids, I'm going to make you bored. I think you're right, though, and you know, really limiting the screen time. And my wife hates that Xbox. It was my decision to get it for Christmas a couple of years ago, and probably not a good decision. But then again, on the other hand, I'd feel like I'm not a good parent because all their friends have it. So it's like it's just such a challenge.
It is a challenge. It is a challenge.
Got to limit it, and I believe we do a pretty good job with that. But it's, you know, like you said, being a parent is a huge challenge. You're always learning along with your kids.
Yep.
And I think, you know, love and faith have to be the core of it.
Right.
And yeah, so any other subjects, any other comments you'd like to make before we sign off?
Boy, this has been a great conversation. I really enjoyed.
It could go forever.
Yes,
I'll probably look you up for some you know, formal coaching.
Right.
And again, we will put links in the show notes of how you can contact Pam to get some help. This is probably one of the most important jobs you can do as an adult if you've got children, is making sure you're doing right by your children.
Right. And a lot of the parents, well, you know, parents think that they need help because their child is, I don't know, they have major problems. And yet when I coach with parents, most of the parents that I coach with they want better connection with their kids. They want to be more effective in disciplining and building wisdom and responsibility. And I think, wow, the benefit to kids if parents can get coaching like this before there's big issues. I think that is the biggest benefit to a family, is to get coaching before you have the big issues. I work with parents who have big issues too, but I love it when they come and sit with me and we can talk through things like what you're going through and just become more effective and more connected with your kids.
Do you ever include the children in the coaching?
I at this point, I'm looking into it, but at this point, I love being able to impact the parents and letting the parents mentor their own children, because the children don't know me. They don't have a relationship with me. So if I can mentor parents, then parents can actually use what I have for them to mentor their own children and build that relationship. So I think that's more beneficial.
Yeah, I would think maybe I'm just thinking my situation, if my kid was to be, you know, going to coaching, you know, behavior coaching, maybe we'd call it, and you know, that just having that outside authority figure, because my kids don't have that with no school. We do go to homeschool co-op, you know, once a week, so there is some of that, but I don't know, maybe there are situations where having the kid, that's just my opinion, maybe I'm wrong, but might be.
I'm in the process of looking at it.
Might be impactful to
because I've had somebody ask me about that, so I am looking at it.
And you'd probably have to, you know, change the flow of how you teach.
Absolutely.
With the child present, but yeah, very beneficial. I mean, nobody knows how to be a parent. Obviously, everyone had their parents, and I'm sure, you know, my parents did some good things and some bad things, but how do you know? And so having
Exactly.
somebody who's studied this to be able to coach you, and probably, you know, when your kids are real young, or even if you're just pregnant and your child is on the way, it'd probably be a good time to get some advice, because you have no idea what it's like.
Right.
So.
Yep. Very true. Very true.
Well.
Yeah.
Great conversation again. Like I said, we're going to get more local on the show from time to time, and like I said, you know, Pam may not be famous, but the message is just as important as fame doesn't make the message any more or less important. So, yeah, it's been a pleasure, Pam.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here, and thank you for tuning in. If you've got any suggestions for guests that you'd like to see on the show, if you'd like to be a guest, if you've got a message you'd like to have heard, contact me. I'll put the contact in the show notes as well. I'm pretty easy to get hold of on Facebook, social media. And again, thank you so much for tuning in to the Truth Expedition. Don't tread on me, don't shed on me.